A family of four vanished from their Iowa home on a quiet Tuesday night, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak. But 9 years later, a real estate agent opens a basement door and discovers something that defies all logic and changes everything we thought we knew about survival. What happened to the Caldwell family would challenge every assumption about human resilience and reveal a truth so complex that it would leave investigators, psychologists, and the entire nation struggling to understand how love and hope can flourish in the most impossible circumstances. The discovery would not just solve one of Iowa's most baffling missing persons cases, but would also teach us profound lessons about the unbreakable bonds of family and the extraordinary lengths people will go to protect each other, even when faced with the unthinkable. Cedar Falls, Iowa, was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names and children played outside until the streetlights came on. It was here that David and Rachel Caldwell had built what seemed like the perfect life with their 8-year-old twins, Oliver and Sophie. David, 34 years old, owned a small but successful carpentry business that had been operating for over a decade. His craftsmanship was renowned throughout the county, and his workshop behind their modest 2-story home was always busy with custom furniture orders and home renovation projects. Local families trusted him with their most important projects, from baby cribs to kitchen renovations. His gentle nature and meticulous attention to detail made him not just a skilled craftsman, but a friend to every client. Rachel, 32, taught 3rd grade at Cedar Falls Elementary School, where she had worked for 7 years. Her classroom was known for its warmth and creativity, decorated with student artwork and filled with the laughter of children who adored their teacher. Parents often requested that their children be placed in Mrs. Caldwell's class, knowing she would nurture both their academic growth and emotional development. Her colleagues respected her dedication, and she had received the district's Teacher of the Year award just 2 years before the family's disappearance. Oliver and Sophie were inseparable twins who brought joy wherever they went. Oliver, older by 12 minutes, was fascinated by his father's tools and spent countless hours in the workshop, learning to sand wood and organize hardware. His dream was to build a treehouse that could be seen from space, a goal that made his parents smile and encourage his ambitious thinking. Sophie shared her mother's love of reading and art, often found curled up with a book or creating elaborate drawings that covered every available surface in their home. The Caldwell house on Elm Street was a testament to David's skills and Rachel's nurturing spirit. The front porch, which David had rebuilt with intricate woodwork, was always decorated with seasonal flowers that Rachel and the twins planted together. Inside, family photos covered the walls, capturing years of birthday parties, holiday celebrations, and weekend adventures. The kitchen table, handcrafted by David from local oak, was the heart of their home, where homework was completed, meals were shared, and dreams were discussed. Their life followed comfortable routines that gave structure and security to their days. Tuesday evenings were family movie nights, complete with homemade popcorn and hot chocolate. Saturday mornings meant pancakes shaped like animals, followed by trips to the local farmers market, where the twins would help choose ingredients for the week's meals. Sunday afternoons were reserved for family bike rides along the Cedar River Trail, with stops at their favorite ice cream stand. David and Rachel had met 12 years earlier at Iowa State University, where David studied construction management and Rachel pursued elementary education. Their courtship was built on shared values of family, community service, and simple pleasures. They married in a small ceremony at Rachel's childhood church, surrounded by friends and family who could see that their love was the kind that would last a lifetime. The twins had been a joyful surprise, arriving 2 years ahead of schedule, but welcomed with overwhelming happiness. David had spent months preparing their nursery, creating matching cribs with hand-carved animal motifs that became family heirlooms. Rachel had read every parenting book she could find, determined to give her children the same loving foundation that her own parents had provided. As Oliver and Sophie grew, they became the center of their parents' world without ever becoming spoiled or demanding. David would close his workshop early to attend their soccer games and school plays, while Rachel volunteered for every field trip and classroom celebration. The twins learned early that they were loved unconditionally, but also that love came with responsibility to be kind, honest, and hard-working. Their extended family was equally close-knit. David's parents, who lived just 30 minutes away in Waterloo, visited every Sunday for dinner, bringing David's mother's famous apple pie and his father's endless supply of jokes that made the twins giggle uncontrollably. Rachel's sister, who lived in Des Moines with her own family, made monthly visits that turned into weekend celebrations filled with cousin adventures and aunt-uncle bonding time. The Caldwells were active in their community beyond just their professional lives. David volunteered with Habitat for Humanity, using his carpentry skills to help build homes for families in need. Rachel organized the annual school book fair and coached the academic bowl team. The entire family participated in community events, from the 4th of July parade to the Christmas tree lighting ceremony, where David's handcrafted wooden ornaments were always featured prominently. Their home was a gathering place for friends and neighbors. Rachel's colleagues often stopped by for coffee and conversation, while David's workshop became an informal meeting place for other craftsmen who sought his advice and expertise. The twins' friends knew they were always welcome at the Caldwell house, where snacks were plentiful and parents were genuinely interested in hearing about their day. Financial security was not something the Caldwells took for granted, but David's business provided steady income that allowed Rachel to focus on teaching rather than worrying about money. They lived modestly, saving carefully for the twins' college education, and taking annual family vacations to places like the Wisconsin Dells and Lake Okoboji, where memories were made around campfires and swimming adventures. On the evening of October 14, 2014, everything seemed perfectly normal. David had finished a custom bookshelf for a client and was cleaning his workshop while the twins helped organize his tools. Rachel was grading papers at the kitchen table, occasionally looking up to smile at the sounds of laughter coming from the backyard. They had eaten dinner together, shared details about their day, and made plans for the weekend. The twins had taken their baths and were in their pajamas, reading bedtime books when David tucked them in. Rachel kissed them goodnight, reminding them that tomorrow was Wednesday, which meant library day at school. Oliver mentioned that he wanted to find a book about building with wood, while Sophie said she was looking for more books about horses, her latest fascination. David and Rachel spent the evening together on their front porch, discussing plans for Oliver's upcoming birthday party and Sophie's request to take piano lessons. They watched their neighbor, Mr. Patterson, walk his dog and waved to the Johnson family as they returned from their son's baseball practice. Everything was beautifully, perfectly ordinary. None of them could have imagined that this would be their last normal evening in their beloved home for 9 long years. Wednesday morning, October 15th, began like any other day should have. The sun rose over Cedar Falls, casting its usual golden light through the maple trees that lined Elm Street. But inside the Caldwell house, something was terribly wrong. At 7:30 in the morning, Rachel's colleague and closest friend, Diana Foster, arrived to pick up Rachel for their usual Wednesday carpool to school. Diana had been sharing the morning drive with Rachel for 3 years, a routine that allowed them to discuss lesson plans and enjoy a few minutes of adult conversation before their day filled with 8-year-old energy and questions. Diana knocked on the front door and waited, checking her watch. Rachel was never late, and her car was still in the driveway next to David's pickup truck. The October morning was crisp, and Diana pulled her jacket tighter as she knocked again, louder this time. Still no answer. Growing concerned, Diana walked around to the back of the house, where she could see David's workshop. The door was closed, which was unusual for this time of morning, when David typically opened it early to let in fresh air before beginning his daily projects. She called out his name, but only silence greeted her. Diana tried calling Rachel's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She then called David's number, with the same result. Her concern turned to alarm as she realized that the family's morning routine had been completely disrupted. Walking back to the front porch, Diana noticed that Tuesday's newspaper was still lying on the walkway, and the mail from Monday remained in the mailbox. The front door was unlocked, which immediately struck her as wrong since Rachel was careful about home security, especially with 2 young children. Diana pushed open the door and called out, "Rachel? David, are you okay?" Her voice echoed through the quiet house, met only by the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway that David had restored as a wedding gift for Rachel. The scene inside was puzzling rather than obviously alarming. The kitchen showed evidence of the previous evening's dinner. Dishes were still in the sink, and Rachel's grading papers were spread across the table exactly as she had left them. The coffee maker was programmed but had not been turned on, suggesting that no one had started their morning routine. Diana climbed the stairs, calling out again as she went. The twins' bedroom doors were open, revealing beds that had clearly been slept in but were now empty. Oliver's wooden truck collection was scattered across his floor, and Sophie's favorite stuffed horse was sitting on her pillow as if waiting for her return. The master bedroom showed similar signs of normal nighttime activity, followed by mysterious absence. David's work clothes from Tuesday were in the laundry hamper, and Rachel's teaching outfit for Wednesday was laid out on the chair beside their bed, still waiting to be worn. Diana's hands were shaking as she called 911 at 8:15. That morning, the dispatcher initially treated it as a routine welfare check, but Diana's detailed description of the family's reliable routines and the strange evidence of interrupted normal life elevated the call's priority. Officer Kevin Brady arrived at 8:45, followed 10 minutes later by Detective Maria Rodriguez, who would become the lead investigator on what would soon be classified as Cedar Falls' most perplexing missing persons case. Detective Rodriguez was a 15-year law enforcement professional who had handled dozens of missing persons cases, from teenage runaways to elderly individuals with dementia who had wandered away from care facilities. But the Caldwell case presented unusual elements that immediately captured her full attention. The house showed no signs of forced entry, struggle, or hasty departure. Personal belongings that people would typically take for even a short trip remained untouched. Rachel's purse sat on the kitchen counter with her wallet, identification and credit cards inside. David's wallet was on his dresser, containing over $200 in cash and all of his identification documents. More puzzling was the absence of essential items that a family with young children would never leave behind. The twins' school backpacks were missing, along with some of their favorite toys and books. Several changes of clothing appeared to be gone from everyone's closets, but not packed in any systematic way that would suggest planned travel. David's truck and Rachel's car were both in the driveway, ruling out the possibility that the family had driven themselves anywhere. The vehicles were thoroughly searched and processed for evidence, revealing nothing unusual except for the absence of the car seats that Oliver and Sophie still used for safety. Detective Rodriguez began interviewing neighbors, starting with the houses immediately adjacent to the Caldwell property. Mr. Patterson, the elderly gentleman who lived next door, had been walking his dog around 9 o'clock Tuesday evening and remembered seeing the family on their front porch, talking quietly and appearing completely normal. The Johnson family across the street reported that their teenage son had returned from baseball practice around 10 o'clock Tuesday night and noticed that the Caldwell house was dark, except for the porch light, which was typical for their usual bedtime routine. No one had heard any unusual sounds, seen unfamiliar vehicles, or witnessed anything that suggested distress or emergency. The family had simply vanished between their normal Tuesday evening activities and Wednesday morning, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt the Cedar Falls community for years to come. Within hours of the initial report, news of the disappearance spread throughout the small city. Rachel's fellow teachers at Cedar Falls Elementary were devastated, unable to comprehend how their colleague and friend could simply disappear with her entire family. David's clients and fellow craftsmen gathered at his workshop, searching for any clues that might explain what had happened. The twins' classmates and friends were confused and frightened. 8-year-olds struggled to understand how Oliver and Sophie could be there for Tuesday's math test and gone by Wednesday morning's reading circle. School counselors were brought in to help children process their fear and confusion. Local churches organized prayer vigils, and community volunteers began creating missing person flyers with the family's photographs and description. The Cedar Falls Police Department set up a dedicated tip line and assigned additional officers to canvass the area and follow up on any potential leads. As word spread beyond Cedar Falls, state and federal resources were mobilized. The Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation joined the case, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation was consulted about the possibility of kidnapping or interstate transportation of the missing family. Search teams combed through wooded areas surrounding Cedar Falls, checked abandoned buildings and remote properties, and followed the Cedar River for miles in both directions. Volunteers with search dogs covered hundreds of acres, hoping to find any trace of the Caldwell family. The media attention intensified when national news outlets picked up the story of the missing family. The case had elements that captured public imagination: a devoted family, mysterious circumstances, and the complete absence of logical explanations. Television news crews arrived in Cedar Falls, interviewing friends, neighbors, and anyone who had known the Caldwells. Rachel's parents, who lived in Colorado, flew to Iowa immediately and took up residence in a local hotel, refusing to return home until their daughter and grandchildren were found. David's parents opened their house to investigators and volunteers, providing a coordination center for search efforts and emotional support for everyone involved in trying to bring the family home. Banks were contacted to monitor the family's accounts for any unusual activity, but no transactions appeared after Tuesday, October 14th. Cell phone records showed that both David and Rachel's phones had gone silent at approximately 11:30 Tuesday night, with their last locations pinging from towers near their home. As days turned into weeks, Detective Rodriguez expanded the investigation to include David's business clients and Rachel's school associates, looking for anyone who might have had unusual interest in the family or access to their routines. Background checks revealed nothing concerning. The Caldwells had no known enemies, no financial troubles, and no involvement in any activities that would make them targets for violence or kidnapping. The case that had begun as a simple welfare check had evolved into one of Iowa's most intensive missing persons investigations, consuming resources and attention from multiple law enforcement agencies, while leaving a community devastated by the loss of a family that had been the embodiment of everything good about small-town American life. As autumn gave way to winter, the Caldwell investigation consumed Detective Rodriguez's days and haunted her nights. She had worked missing persons cases before, but none had presented such a complete absence of logical leads or reasonable explanations. The detective established a detailed timeline of the family's final known activities, interviewing everyone who had interacted with any member of the Caldwell family during their last week. Rachel's teaching assistant remembered that she had been excited about a new reading program she planned to implement after the upcoming parent-teacher conferences. David's last client, Mr. Hendricks, recalled that David had been enthusiastic about a custom dining room set he was designing, and had scheduled their next meeting for the following Friday. Oliver's soccer coach confirmed that the boy had been at practice on Saturday morning, scoring 2 goals and chattering excitedly about his upcoming birthday party planned for the following month. Sophie's piano teacher, whom she had just started lessons with, said the little girl was progressing quickly and had asked to learn a song she could play for her parents' anniversary in December. Every piece of evidence pointed to a family actively engaged in planning their future, not preparing to disappear. This made their vanishing even more bewildering and suggested that whatever had happened to them had been sudden and completely unexpected. Detective Rodriguez worked closely with the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Behavioral Analysis Unit to develop profiles of possible suspects or scenarios. Kidnapping for ransom seemed unlikely, given the family's modest financial circumstances and the complete absence of any demands or contact from potential abductors. Human trafficking was considered but seemed improbable for a family of 4, including 2 young children from a small Iowa community. The investigation expanded to include a comprehensive review of David's business dealings and client relationships. Every person who had hired his carpentry services over the past 5 years was interviewed, and their backgrounds investigated. Several clients had keys to David's workshop for project deliveries, but all were accounted for and had solid alibis for Tuesday evening. Rachel's school connections were similarly scrutinized. The investigation looked at every parent of her current and former students, every colleague and administrator she worked with, and every vendor or volunteer who had regular access to the school building where she worked. Again, nothing suspicious emerged from months of careful investigation. The family's digital footprint was exhaustively analyzed. Computer specialists examined their home computers, phones, and internet usage patterns, looking for any communication with strangers, unusual online activity, or evidence of planning a disappearance. Social media accounts showed typical family sharing, photos of the twins' activities, updates about David's woodworking projects, and Rachel's classroom celebrations. Financial investigators found no evidence of secret accounts, unusual withdrawals, or any financial preparation for disappearing. The family's modest savings account remained untouched, and their regular monthly expenses continued to be automatically deducted from David's business account until Detective Rodriguez had them suspended. As winter deepened, Search efforts continued despite harsh weather conditions. Volunteer groups organized systematic searches of rural areas within a 100-mile radius of Cedar Falls. Lakes and quarries were dragged, and abandoned farm buildings were thoroughly investigated. The Cedar River was searched repeatedly, both by divers and by teams following its course downstream for hundreds of miles. Despite the intensive efforts, not a single piece of physical evidence was discovered. No clothing, personal belongings, or any trace of the Caldwell family emerged from months of searching. It was as if they had simply ceased to exist on that Tuesday evening in October. The case attracted attention from psychics, amateur investigators, and conspiracy theorists, who offered various theories about what might have happened to the family. Detective Rodriguez followed up on credible tips while filtering out the speculation and false leads that complicated the investigation. One promising lead emerged when a truck driver reported seeing a family matching the Caldwell's description at a rest stop near Des Moines on Wednesday morning. However, surveillance footage from the location showed no evidence of the family, and the witness later admitted uncertainty about the identification. Another potential breakthrough came when a hotel clerk in Nebraska reported that a family resembling the Caldwells had checked in under false names. Investigation revealed that the family was actually tourists from Minnesota who bore only superficial resemblance to the missing Iowans. As the first anniversary of the disappearance approached, Detective Rodriguez had interviewed over 300 people, followed up on more than 500 tips, and coordinated search efforts covering thousands of square miles. Despite the exhaustive investigation, she was no closer to solving the case than she had been on that first morning, when Diana Foster had called 911. The community of Cedar Falls struggled to maintain hope while dealing with the ongoing trauma of the unsolved disappearance. Rachel's classroom at Cedar Falls Elementary was kept exactly as she had left it for months before finally being reassigned to a new teacher. David's workshop remained locked and untouched, his current projects sitting exactly where he had left them on Tuesday evening. The twins' friends and classmates moved on to 4th grade and then 5th grade, but teachers reported that many children continued to ask about Oliver and Sophie, wondering if they would ever return to finish elementary school with their class. Diana Foster took a leave of absence from teaching, unable to drive past the Caldwell house each morning without being overwhelmed by grief and confusion. Other friends and neighbors reported similar struggles with the daily reminders of the family's absence and the complete lack of closure or understanding about what had happened to them. National media attention gradually faded as newer cases captured public interest, but the Caldwell disappearance remained a topic of discussion on true crime forums and missing persons websites. Amateur investigators developed elaborate theories about everything from witness protection program involvement to alien abduction, but none provided any actual evidence or viable leads. Detective Rodriguez refused to let the case go cold, even as administrative pressure mounted to redirect resources to more recent crimes. She maintained regular contact with federal investigators and continued following up on any tips or potential leads that emerged. Her dedication to finding the Caldwell family became legendary within law enforcement circles, but also took a personal toll as years passed without resolution. The investigation had consumed enormous resources from multiple agencies and countless volunteer hours from community members, yet the Caldwell family remained as mysteriously absent as they had been on that first confusing morning when their empty house had raised so many questions and provided so few answers. By the 3rd anniversary of the disappearance, the Caldwell case had officially transitioned to cold case status, though Detective Rodriguez continued working it alongside her current assignments. The active daily investigation had necessarily scaled back, but the case file remained open, and hope persisted in the hearts of those who had known and loved the missing family. Rachel's parents, who had relocated to Cedar Falls to be close to the investigation, established the Caldwell Family Foundation, dedicated to supporting other families dealing with missing loved ones. Their courage in channeling grief into helping others inspired the community and kept the family's memory alive while they waited for answers. David's parents struggled more visibly with the passage of time. His father, who had taught David carpentry skills as a boy, would sometimes be found sitting in David's locked workshop, staring at the unfinished projects and wondering if his son would ever return to complete them. His mother kept the twins' Christmas presents from that first year in her closet, unable to throw them away, but unable to look at them without crying. The anniversary dates became community events of remembrance and renewed determination. October 15th was declared Caldwell Family Day in Cedar Falls, with vigils, prayer services, and renewed appeals for information. Local businesses displayed missing person posters, and the case remained prominently featured on the police department's website and social media accounts. In the fourth year, Detective Rodriguez was promoted to sergeant but requested to remain involved in the Caldwell investigation. Her replacement, Detective Patricia Walsh, brought fresh eyes and new perspectives to the case. Walsh had a reputation for solving cold cases through innovative approaches and technological advances that had not been available during the initial investigation. Detective Walsh ordered a complete review of all evidence and witness statements, looking for connections or patterns that might have been missed during the intense early months of the investigation. She also took advantage of improved database systems that could cross-reference the Caldwell case with similar disappearances nationwide. The review process took 8 months, but yielded several interesting observations. While no new evidence emerged, Detective Walsh noticed subtle patterns in the family's final weeks that suggested they may have been more concerned about their safety than anyone had realized at the time. Rachel had asked her principal about the school's security procedures and had inquired whether teachers could request escorts to their cars after evening events. David had installed new locks on his workshop and home, telling clients that he was upgrading security after some tools had been moved around in suspicious ways. These small changes in behavior had not seemed significant during the original investigation, but Detective Walsh wondered if the family might have been aware of some threat that they had not shared with friends or family members. This possibility opened new avenues for investigation and fresh hope for resolution. The 5th anniversary brought unexpected media attention when a national television program featured the Caldwell case as part of a documentary about unsolved family disappearances. The program generated hundreds of new tips, though most were quickly determined to be mistaken sightings or unrelated information. One tip seemed more promising than the others. A former Cedar Falls resident who had moved to Oregon called to report that she had seen a man resembling David Caldwell working construction at a remote resort property. The woman had not approached the man, but felt strongly that his mannerisms and appearance matched her memories of David. Detective Walsh personally traveled to Oregon to investigate the tip. The man at the resort did bear some resemblance to David Caldwell, but fingerprints and background verification confirmed that he was not the missing father. Still, Walsh appreciated that people continued to watch for the family and remained willing to report potential sightings. The 6th and 7th years brought fewer tips but continued community support. A scholarship fund established in the twins' names helped local students pursue higher education, and the annual Day of Remembrance continued to draw participants from across Iowa and neighboring states. Detective Walsh used advances in forensic technology to re-examine physical evidence from the Caldwell home. DNA analysis that had not been available in 2014 was applied to trace evidence, but no new information emerged. Digital forensic specialists used improved techniques to analyze the family's electronic devices, but again found nothing that had not been discovered in the original investigation. As the 8th anniversary approached, Detective Walsh made a decision that would prove crucial to eventually solving the case. She requested permission to expand the search area and investigative scope beyond the immediate Cedar Falls vicinity, arguing that 8 years of intensive local investigation had been thorough, but ultimately unsuccessful. The expanded investigation included a comprehensive review of property records and real estate transactions within a 200-mile radius of Cedar Falls. Detective Walsh theorized that if the family was being held somewhere, it would likely be in a location that provided privacy and security for their captors. This expanded approach required enormous resources and coordination with law enforcement agencies across multiple counties and states. The work was methodical and time-consuming, involving the review of thousands of property records, tax documents, and ownership transfers. During the 8th year, Detective Walsh also implemented a new community outreach program, visiting schools, churches, and community organizations to refresh public memory about the case and encourage people to report any information, no matter how insignificant it might seem. The program was well received and generated renewed interest in the case. Local newspapers ran anniversary stories, and social media campaigns kept the Caldwell family in public consciousness. While no breakthrough information emerged immediately, The sustained attention ensured that the case remained active in the minds of area residents. As the 9th anniversary of the disappearance approached, Detective Walsh had assembled the most comprehensive case file in Cedar Falls Police Department history. Every possible lead had been investigated, every witness re-interviewed, and every piece of evidence analyzed with the latest available technology. Yet the Caldwell family remained missing, and their fate remained unknown. The investigation had become a testament to law enforcement dedication and community persistence, but it had not yet provided the answers that so many people desperately sought. Little did anyone know that the resolution to 9 years of questions and heartbreak was just weeks away, waiting to be discovered behind a door that no one had thought to open. September 23, 2023, began as an ordinary Tuesday for Linda Chen, a real estate agent with 15 years of experience selling properties throughout the Cedar Falls area. She had scheduled a routine inspection of a farmhouse property at 1200 Oakwood Road, about 20 miles southeast of Cedar Falls, that had recently been inherited by out-of-state relatives who wanted to sell it quickly. The property belonged to the estate of Harold Brennan, an 82-year-old recluse who had died 3 months earlier from natural causes. Brennan had lived alone on the 40-acre farm for over 30 years, rarely interacting with neighbors and maintaining his property in a way that discouraged visitors. His nearest neighbor lived more than a mile away, and the winding gravel driveway that led to his house was so overgrown that many people did not even realize a residence existed at the end of it. Linda had never met Harold Brennan, but she had heard about him from other real estate professionals who described him as an eccentric hermit who kept to himself and maintained his property like a fortress. The farmhouse itself was a substantial 2-story structure built in the 1920s, surrounded by outbuildings and workshops that Brennan had constructed over the decades. The inheriting relatives lived in California and had never visited the Iowa property. They had hired Linda sight unseen based on her reputation and her familiarity with rural properties in the area. Their instructions were simple: assess the property's condition and market value, then arrange for a quick sale to liquidate the asset. Linda arrived at the property at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, driving her sedan carefully down the rutted driveway that seemed more suited to farm equipment than passenger vehicles. The house appeared solid but showed signs of deferred maintenance and the neglect that often accompanies elderly homeowners who can no longer maintain large properties. The exterior inspection revealed a property that would need significant work to attract buyers. The roof needed repairs, the windows required updating, and the landscaping had grown wild over years of minimal attention. However, the basic structure appeared sound, and Linda estimated that with some investment, the property could appeal to buyers looking for rural acreage and workshop space. Harold Brennan's attorney had provided Linda with keys and alarm codes, along with a detailed property description that mentioned the main house, a large barn, several workshop buildings, and what was described as a storm shelter or root cellar beneath the house. The attorney had admitted that he had never personally toured the entire property, as Brennan had been secretive about access and had discouraged visitors even during business meetings. Linda began her inspection with the main house, noting the solid hardwood floors, spacious rooms, and the extensive built-in cabinetry that suggested skilled craftsmanship. The house had been maintained adequately, but showed the wear that comes with decades of occupation by a single elderly man who prioritized function over appearance. The kitchen was dated but functional, with appliances from the 1980s and custom cabinets that appeared to have been built by someone with considerable woodworking skills. Linda made notes about necessary updates while appreciating the quality of the original construction and craftsmanship details. As she moved through the house, Linda noticed several unusual features that seemed designed for security and privacy. Windows had been fitted with heavy wooden shutters that could be closed and locked from the inside. Doors were unusually solid and equipped with multiple deadbolt locks. The house felt more like a fortress than a typical farmhouse, though she assumed this reflected Harold Brennan's reclusive personality. The second floor contained 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, all showing signs of minimal recent use except for what appeared to be the master bedroom, where Brennan had lived. One bedroom contained exercise equipment and bookshelves filled with volumes on subjects ranging from agriculture to electronics to psychology. After completing the main house inspection, Linda moved to the basement to assess the foundation and mechanical systems. The basement was larger than typical for farmhouses of this era, with concrete walls and floors that appeared to have been reinforced and updated sometime in the past 20 years. The basement contained a modern furnace and water heater, electrical panels that had been upgraded to current codes, and storage areas filled with tools, equipment, and supplies that suggested Brennan had been prepared for extended periods of self-sufficiency. There were also freezers, storage cabinets, and shelving systems that could have supported a family much larger than one elderly man. As Linda was photographing the basement for her listing materials, she noticed a door at the far end of the space that was partially concealed behind a large shelving unit. The attorney's property description had mentioned a storm shelter, and Linda assumed this door led to that space. Moving the shelving unit required considerable effort, but Linda was thorough in her property inspections and wanted to assess every aspect of the structure. Behind the shelving, she found a heavy wooden door, equipped with multiple locks and what appeared to be a sophisticated security system that was still receiving power. The door was unlocked, though Linda later learned that Harold Brennan had unlocked it for the final time, just days before his death, as if he had been preparing for someone to eventually discover what lay beyond it. Linda pushed open the door and found herself looking down a short hallway that led to another door. The construction was clearly newer than the rest of the basement, with modern lighting and what appeared to be an air circulation system that was still operating. As she walked down the hallway, Linda could hear sounds that made no sense in an empty house. Voices, movement, and what sounded like normal household activity. Her confusion turned to shock as she realized the sounds were coming from beyond the second door. Linda later told investigators that her first thought was that squatters had taken up residence in the property after Harold Brennan's death. She called out, "Hello, is someone there?" and was answered by a man's voice asking, "Who is that?" "Harold, is that you?" Linda pushed open the second door and stepped into a space that defied all logic and expectation. She found herself in what appeared to be a comfortable, well-furnished living area that was clearly occupied and had been maintained as a family home. The space was larger than she had expected, with multiple rooms including bedrooms, a kitchen area, and a common living space. The construction was professional and modern, with proper lighting, ventilation, and all the amenities needed for long-term habitation. But what shocked Linda beyond her ability to process was the presence of 4 people who looked up at her with expressions of surprise and curiosity, rather than fear or alarm. A man and woman, both appearing to be in their 40s, and 2 teenagers who were clearly twins and bore a strong resemblance to each other. The man stepped forward and said, "I am David Caldwell. This is my wife Rachel, and these are our children, Oliver and Sophie. We have been living here for 9 years. Are you here to help us?" Linda later described the moment as the most surreal experience of her life. The family appeared healthy, well-dressed, and remarkably calm, given the circumstances. The living space was clean, organized, and showed evidence of normal family life, including books, games, artwork, and personal belongings. David Caldwell looked older than the photographs Linda remembered from the missing person posters that had been displayed throughout Cedar Falls for years, but his identity was unmistakable. Rachel appeared similarly aged, but maintained the gentle demeanor that her former teaching colleagues had described. The twins, who had been 8 years old when they disappeared, were now 17 and bore the physical changes of adolescence. But their faces still clearly resembled the children who had vanished from Cedar Falls 9 years earlier. Linda's immediate reaction was to call 911, but David Caldwell asked her to wait and allow them to explain their situation. His request was made calmly and without any indication that Linda was in danger or that the family was being held against their will. What Linda discovered in that underground living space would challenge every assumption about the Caldwell disappearance and reveal a truth more complex and emotionally complicated than anyone could have imagined. The family had not only survived 9 years of captivity, but they had created a life, maintained their bonds, and found ways to grow and thrive under impossible circumstances. Their survival story would teach profound lessons about human resilience, the power of family love, and the extraordinary adaptability, the human spirit, when faced with unthinkable challenges. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come: the identity of their captor and the complex relationship that had developed between the family and the man who had taken them from their home, but had also become something entirely unexpected in their lives. The Cedar Falls Police Department received Linda Chen's 911 call at 3:27 in the afternoon, and Detective Patricia Walsh arrived at the Brennan property 45 minutes later with a team of officers, paramedics, and federal agents who had been monitoring the Caldwell case for 9 years. What they found challenged every assumption about kidnapping, captivity, and human survival that their training and experience had prepared them for. The Caldwell family was not just alive, they had created a life that was in many ways as rich and meaningful as the one they had left behind in Cedar Falls. The underground living space was a marvel of engineering and planning that Harold Brennan had constructed over several years before the family's disappearance. The facility included 6 rooms totaling over 1,500 square feet, with proper plumbing, electrical systems, air circulation, and even internet connectivity that had allowed the family to maintain some connection with the outside world. David, Rachel, Oliver, and Sophie Caldwell met their rescuers with a mixture of relief and apprehension that surprised the experienced law enforcement professionals. They appeared physically healthy, emotionally stable, and remarkably well-adjusted, considering the circumstances of their captivity. But as Detective Walsh began interviewing the family members separately, she discovered that their situation had been far more complex than a typical kidnapping case. Harold Brennan had not been a monster who had terrorized his captives. He had become something much more complicated and emotionally confusing. David Caldwell's account of their abduction began with a revelation that stunned investigators. Harold Brennan had been a client of David's carpentry business, commissioning custom furniture and home improvements over a period of 2 years before the disappearance. During their professional relationship, Brennan had become obsessed with the Caldwell family's happiness and closeness. Brennan, who had never married and had no family of his own, had developed what he described in journals found after his death as an overwhelming need to experience family life. His obsession had grown from admiration to envy to a desperate desire to possess what the Caldwells represented. On the night of October 14, 2014, Brennan had used his knowledge of the family's routines and his access to David's workshop to drug the family's evening meal. He had been delivering what he claimed was a thank-you dinner for David's excellent work, but the food contained sedatives that rendered the family unconscious. Brennan had then transported the unconscious family to his property, where he had spent months preparing the underground facility specifically for their captivity. His plan had been detailed and methodical, designed to keep the family comfortable and healthy while preventing any possibility of escape or rescue. However, what made the Caldwell case unique was how the relationship between captor and captives had evolved over 9 years of forced cohabitation. Rather than terrorizing the family or treating them as prisoners, Brennan had desperately wanted them to accept him as a member of their family unit. Rachel Caldwell explained to investigators that their survival had depended on adapting to their circumstances while maintaining their family bonds and finding ways to make their situation bearable. They had quickly realized that resistance or escape attempts would be futile given the security of their underground prison. Instead, they had made a conscious decision to focus on survival, maintaining their physical and mental health, and continuing the children's education and development despite their confinement. This decision had required enormous emotional strength and practical creativity. Harold Brennan had provided them with books, educational materials, exercise equipment, and eventually even internet access that allowed them to continue learning and growing. The twins had essentially received a private education that had kept pace with their peers, though they had missed the social interactions and experiences of normal childhood and adolescence. What investigators found most difficult to understand was how the family had managed to maintain their emotional well-being and family relationships under such extreme circumstances. David and Rachel had somehow preserved their marriage and continued parenting their children effectively despite the trauma and stress of their situation. The twins, who had spent half their lives in captivity, had grown into intelligent, articulate teenagers who showed remarkable resilience and maturity. They had maintained their close sibling bond while developing individual interests and personalities that reflected normal adolescent development. Perhaps most surprisingly, the family had developed what could only be described as a complex relationship with Harold Brennan that included elements of dependency, sympathy, and even affection. They had not experienced him as a cruel captor, but as a deeply disturbed man who had given them everything he could within the constraints of their captivity. Brennan had eaten meals with the family, participated in conversations about books and current events, and had even celebrated birthdays and holidays with them. He had provided medical care when needed, maintained their living space meticulously, and had seemed genuinely concerned about their physical and emotional well-being. The family's journals, which they had been encouraged to keep by Brennan, revealed the gradual evolution of their relationship with their captor, from fear and hatred to a reluctant understanding of his psychological needs and motivations. They had come to see him as mentally ill rather than evil, though they never forgot that he had stolen their freedom and their former lives. Oliver and Sophie, who had been young children when taken, had adapted to their circumstances with the resilience that children often display in traumatic situations. They had created games, learning etiquette, and entertainment that had helped them maintain normal developmental patterns despite their confinement. As teenagers, they had expressed interest in the outside world and had used their internet access to learn about changes that had occurred during their captivity. They had been aware of the ongoing search efforts and had known that their extended family and community had never stopped hoping for their return. The family had also maintained hope for eventual freedom, though they had not attempted escape because Brennan had convinced them that such attempts would result in their death, and that their only chance for survival was to accept their situation and wait for circumstances to change. Harold Brennan's death from a heart attack 3 months before their discovery had actually created anxiety for the family, who had worried about what would happen to them without his care and protection. They had been rationing food and wondering how long they could survive when Linda Chen had discovered their underground home. The psychological evaluations conducted after their rescue revealed that all 4 family members were remarkably mentally healthy given their circumstances. They had maintained their individual identities, their family relationships, and their hope for the future through 9 years of captivity that would have broken many people. Their survival strategy had been built on love, mutual support, adaptation, and an incredible capacity for finding meaning and purpose, even in the most constrained circumstances. They had proven that the human spirit could not only survive, but could find ways to thrive even when faced with seemingly impossible challenges. The Caldwell family's experience would become a case study in trauma survival, family resilience, and the complex psychology of long-term captivity. But more than that, it would provide profound lessons about the power of love, hope, and human adaptability that would inspire people around the world. The Caldwell family's return to the world after 9 years of captivity was both a celebration and a complex process of readjustment that required tremendous support from mental health professionals, law enforcement, and their community. Their first weeks of freedom were spent in a secure medical facility where they received comprehensive physical and psychological evaluations. Remarkably, all 4 family members were found to be in excellent physical health, a testament to Harold Brennan's care and their own commitment to maintaining their fitness and well-being during captivity. The psychological evaluations revealed the extraordinary strength and resilience that had enabled their survival. David and Rachel had maintained their roles as parents and partners throughout their ordeal, providing stability and emotional security for their children, even under the most challenging circumstances. Oliver and Sophie, now 17 years old, had developed into mature, intelligent young adults who had somehow preserved their curiosity about the world and their optimism about the future, despite losing their childhood to captivity. Their educational development had continued through self-directed learning and their parents' teaching, leaving them well prepared to reintegrate into normal educational and social environments. The family's readjustment to freedom included practical challenges that most people could never imagine. Simple activities like shopping in stores, driving in traffic, and being in crowds required gradual exposure and support. The twins, who had spent their formative years in a controlled environment, needed time to adapt to the overwhelming stimulation of normal teenage social interactions. Cedar Falls welcomed the Caldwell family home with an outpouring of love and support that demonstrated the best of human nature. The community had never forgotten them, and their return was treated as a miracle that validated 9 years of hope and persistence. Rachel's position at Cedar Falls Elementary was immediately made available to her, though she chose to take additional time for family healing before returning to work. David's workshop had been maintained by friends and colleagues who had kept his tools and projects exactly as he had left them, ready for his return to the craft he loved. The twins faced unique challenges in rejoining their peer group, as their former classmates were now graduating from high school, while Oliver and Sophie needed time to adjust to normal social dynamics. However, their intelligence, maturity, and positive attitudes helped them integrate successfully into educational programs designed for their specific needs. The legal proceedings related to their case were complicated by Harold Brennan's death, but the family chose to focus on moving forward rather than dwelling on questions of justice and punishment. They expressed a complex mixture of emotions about their captor, acknowledging the harm he had caused while also recognizing that he had cared for them and had not subjected them to the physical abuse or cruelty often associated with kidnapping cases. The Caldwell family's story provided profound lessons about human resilience and the power of love to overcome seemingly impossible circumstances. Their survival had depended on their commitment to each other and their refusal to allow their captivity to destroy their family bonds or their individual identities. Their experience demonstrated that hope and purpose can be maintained even in the darkest circumstances, and that human beings have an incredible capacity for adaptation and growth when supported by love and mutual care. The family had not just survived their ordeal, they had found ways to continue growing, learning and loving each other throughout 9 years of captivity. The community of Cedar Falls had also learned important lessons about persistence, hope, and the value of never giving up on people who matter. Detective Walsh's dedication to solving the case, the community's ongoing support for the family, and the countless volunteers who had searched for them over 9 years had all contributed to their eventual rescue. Their story inspired people around the world who were facing their own challenges and struggles. The Caldwell family became symbols of hope and resilience, proving that the human spirit could triumph over circumstances that seemed designed to break it. As they began rebuilding their lives in freedom, the Caldwell family remained committed to supporting others who faced trauma and loss. They established a foundation dedicated to helping families affected by missing persons cases and supporting research into trauma recovery and resilience. The twins, who had missed normal childhood experiences, threw themselves into making up for lost time while also using their unique perspective to help other young people facing difficulties. Their maturity and wisdom, gained through extraordinary circumstances, enabled them to offer support and guidance to peers dealing with normal adolescent challenges. David and Rachel's marriage had not only survived their ordeal, but had been strengthened by their shared commitment to protecting their children and maintaining hope for the future. Their relationship became an example of how love and partnership could endure even the most extreme tests. The Caldwell family's experience reminds us that we never know what challenges life may bring, but that we always have choices about how we respond to those challenges. They chose love over hatred, hope over despair, and growth over stagnation, even when their circumstances seem to offer no reason for optimism. Their story teaches us that resilience is not about being unaffected by trauma, but about finding ways to continue living, loving, and growing despite the wounds we carry. It shows us that family bonds, when built on genuine love and mutual support, can withstand pressures that would destroy weaker connections. Most importantly, the Caldwell family's survival demonstrates that the human capacity for hope and healing is far greater than most of us realize. Their experience proves that even in our darkest moments, there are possibilities for light, love, and eventual freedom that we may not be able to see, but that remain real nonetheless. If you found their incredible survival inspiring, please subscribe to True Crime Village and share this story with others who might need to hear about the power of hope and human resilience. The Caldwell family's journey reminds us that no matter what challenges we face, we always have the capacity to choose love, maintain hope, and find ways to keep growing even in the most difficult circumstances. Let us know in the comments what lessons you learned from the Caldwell family's remarkable story of survival. And remember that sometimes the most powerful victories are the quiet ones that happen in the human heart, when we refuse to let circumstances destroy our capacity for love and hope.